I need to warn you before this story begins, because once you hear it, you may never look at your phone the same way again. I found something on my husband's tablet. I wasn't snooping, I wasn't suspicious, but one message showed me a life he lived without me, a name I didn't know, a woman who thought she was the only one. I had two choices: close the screen or open it and lose everything I believed about my marriage. Before you decide whether I made the right choice, listen to what happened next. The night I realized I might not truly know my husband, the house was quiet enough that I could hear the refrigerator hum like it was thinking. I stood in the doorway of our home office, one hand resting on the light switch, the other clutching a mug of tea that had already gone cold. The clock on the wall ticked too loudly, each second stretching like it wanted my attention. I remember thinking, this feeling has a sound, a low, hollow ache, the kind you feel before bad news arrives, when your body somehow knows before your mind does. It wasn't supposed to be anything, just a tablet left on the desk, just a screen that lit up when I brushed past it, just a notification that wasn't meant for me. But that night changed the way I understand love, trust, and the quiet dangers hiding behind glowing screens. Before all of this, my life was ordinary, comfortably so. I had been married to Daniel for 22 years, long enough for our routines to blend into something steady and predictable. We lived in a modest 2-story house on a tree-lined street where the neighbors waved but didn't pry. The kind of place where you knew which floorboard creaked on the stairs and which cupboard door needed an extra shove to close. Daniel liked his mornings quiet. Black coffee, no sugar. The newspaper folded just so, even though he mostly read it on his phone now. I liked to wake earlier than him, just to have those few moments alone in the kitchen. Bare feet on cool tile, the smell of toast hovering between golden and burnt, the radio murmuring softly like a secret. We had no children living at home anymore. Our daughter, Emily, had moved 2 states away for work, calling every Sunday evening like clockwork. Our son, Matthew, was married now, busy building his own life. The house had settled into that phase people warn you about but don't fully explain. The quiet after the raising is done. Daniel worked in IT security. A solid job, reliable. He liked order, liked systems that made sense. I used to joke that he enjoyed fixing problems that had clear solutions, unlike emotions or relationships. He'd smile at that, not offended, just thoughtful. In the evenings, we ate dinner together at the same small oak table we'd owned since our first apartment. Some nights we talked about our days, others we sat in comfortable silence, the television murmuring in the background. He wasn't a man of many words, but I had learned to read the pauses between them. Or at least I thought I had. Looking back, the signs were small, almost invisible. The way he angled his phone screen away from me, not dramatically, just enough. The way his laptop was suddenly password locked when it hadn't been before. The way he'd smile at a message and then tuck the phone into his pocket, like it might bite if left out too long. I told myself it was work. IT security, confidentiality. I told myself that after 2 decades of marriage, trust shouldn't feel this fragile. I told myself a lot of things. The first real shift happened on a Tuesday evening, the kind that usually passes without leaving a mark. I had made soup, chicken noodle, from scratch because the weather had turned colder, and Daniel always said it reminded him of his mother. He was late coming home, which wasn't unusual, but when he walked in, his energy felt scattered, like he'd left part of himself somewhere else. "You okay?" I asked, ladling soup into bowls. "Yeah," he said too quickly, "just tired." He ate quietly, barely tasting the food he usually complimented. His phone buzzed once. He didn't check it, but his shoulders tensed just slightly. That night, he stayed up later than usual, claiming he had emails to answer. I went to bed alone, listening to the house settle, wondering why the silence felt heavier than normal. Over the next few weeks, those moments multiplied. Late nights, early mornings, A new tablet he said he needed for work, sleeker than his old one, always kept close, always face down. He began taking it with him everywhere, even to rooms where he never used to bring electronics, the bathroom, the garage, the back porch. Still, I said nothing, because saying something meant admitting that doubt had crept into the spaces where certainty used to live. The night everything cracked open was unremarkable on the surface. Rain tapped gently against the windows, soft and persistent. Daniel had fallen asleep on the couch, the television casting shifting blue light across his face. I smiled at him then, really smiled, because he looked peaceful, younger somehow. I went to the office to grab a book. That's when I saw the tablet. It was sitting on the desk, screen dark, plugged into the charger. I almost didn't touch it, truly. I remember hesitating, my fingers hovering in the air, like they were waiting for permission. Then, the screen lit up. A notification slid across it, clean and bright. Miss you already. Can't wait to talk again tomorrow. There was a name I didn't recognize. My breath caught, sharp and sudden, like I'd stepped into cold water. For a long moment, I just stood there, staring, my mind scrambling for explanations that wouldn't hurt. A coworker, a client, a misunderstanding. The tablet buzzed again. Another message. This one longer. I didn't read it, not yet. Instead, I sat down in Daniel's chair, the leather cool beneath my palms. I could hear him snoring softly in the other room, unaware that something fundamental had shifted. In that moment, I stood at the edge of a choice I never wanted to face. One click could answer everything. One click could destroy it all. And the most terrifying part wasn't what I might find. It was what I already felt slipping away. I didn't know how long I sat there, staring at that glowing screen like it was a doorway I wasn't sure I should walk through. The house felt different all of a sudden. Smaller, like the walls were leaning in, waiting to see what I'd do. I told myself to stand up, to walk away, to plug the tablet back in and pretend I'd never seen the message. I even reached for the power button once, my thumb trembling just above it. But curiosity isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet and reasonable. Sometimes it sounds like your own voice saying, you deserve to understand your own life. The tablet unlocked with a soft chime. No password. That should have comforted me. Instead, it felt like an invitation I hadn't asked for. The notification opened to a messaging app I didn't recognize. The interface was clean, almost elegant. A pale background, muted colors, designed to feel intimate, personal. The name at the top, Lena R., meant nothing to me. But the conversation stretched back months, longer than I expected, longer than I was ready for. I scrolled slowly at first, like easing into deep water. Short messages at the beginning, casual, friendly. How was your day? Busy, you? Same old, same old. I felt a flicker of relief. This is nothing, I told myself. This is harmless. Then the tone shifted. Inside jokes I didn't understand, compliments layered gently one on top of another until they formed something unmistakably intimate. You always know exactly what to say. I feel like I can be myself with you. I wish we lived closer. My chest tightened. I could hear my own heartbeat now, loud and uneven. I hadn't realized how still I was sitting until my leg cramped, sending a dull ache up my thigh. I scrolled further. There were photos, not explicit, not obscene, but personal. Smiling selfies taken in good light, a woman with kind eyes and the familiar warmth in her expression. The kind of woman you might trust without realizing why. The kind of woman who looked like she listened. And then there were his messages. My husband's words. His humor. His way of speaking. But sharpened, polished, like a version of himself I hadn't seen in years. Talking to you is the best part of my day. I feel more alive when we're like this. Sometimes I think about what my life would be like if we'd met earlier. I pressed my hand to my mouth. A small, broken sound escaped me before I could stop it. This wasn't just flirting. This was a relationship. I leaned back in the chair, the leather creaking softly, and stared at the ceiling. I thought about the soup I'd made that night, about the way he'd barely tasted it, about the nights he'd stayed up late, claiming work had followed him home. All that time, he hadn't been tired. He'd been elsewhere. As I continued reading, something else began to emerge, something more unsettling than emotional intimacy. Daniel wasn't just presenting a slightly different version of himself. He had a different name here, different hobbies, different stories. He told her he lived alone. He told her his marriage had ended years ago. He told her he was planning to move someday, somewhere new. Each lie landed like a small explosion, scattering pieces of the man I thought I knew. I felt grief rising up alongside the anger, a deep, hollow grief for a life I'd believed in, for memories that now felt edited. I wanted to scream, to wake him up and hold the tablet in front of his face like evidence in a courtroom. I wanted him to see what I was seeing, to feel the weight of it the way I did. But instead, I kept reading. Because part of me needed to understand how far this went, needed to know whether I was standing at the edge of betrayal or already buried beneath it. There were voice messages I didn't play. I couldn't bring myself to hear his voice sound tender for someone else. There were plans hinted at, never fully formed but heavy with possibility. One day, if things were different, maybe someday. Those phrases hurt more than any explicit promise would have. They were doors left intentionally ajar. At some points, my hands began to shake so badly I had to set the tablet down. I stood up and paced the room, the carpet soft beneath my feet, grounding me just enough to keep from falling apart completely. In the living room, Daniel shifted in his sleep, muttering something intelligible. I froze, my breath held tight in my chest, half expecting him to wake up and catch me mid-collapse. He didn't, and that somehow made it worse. I returned to the desk and noticed something I'd missed before, a folder on the tablet labeled simply personal. Inside it were accounts, profiles, social media platforms I didn't know he used, each one carefully curated, photos I'd never seen, captions that painted him as thoughtful, introspective, single. This wasn't an accident. This was a life. A second life, built quietly alongside mine. I felt foolish then. Not just hurt. Foolish. I replayed moments in my mind, searching for clues I might have missed. The times he'd seemed distant. The times I'd filled the silence with understanding instead of questions. How did I not see this, I wondered. But another thought followed close behind. How could I have? Because trust, once given, teaches you not to look too closely. I shut the tablet off eventually. My fingers felt numb, like they belonged to someone else. I placed it back exactly where it was, aligning it carefully with the edge of the desk, erasing any sign that it had been disturbed. Then I went to the bathroom and locked the door. I sat on the edge of the tub and cried silently into a towel, biting down hard so no sound would escape. My reflection in the mirror looked older somehow, eyes dulled by a knowledge I didn't want to. When I finally crawled into bed beside Daniel, he stirred and reached for me in his sleep, his hand resting lightly on my arm. The familiarity of the gesture nearly broke me. I lay there, staring into the dark, listening to the rhythm of his breathing, wondering how someone could be so close and so far away at the same time. By morning, nothing had changed, and everything had. Morning came the way it always did. Soft light through the curtains, the distant sound of a garbage truck, the house waking up in pieces. But I didn't wake with it. I'd never really slept. Daniel got up first. I felt the mattress shift, heard the familiar sounds of his routine, the shower turning on, the clink of his watch against the sink, the low hum he always made when he shaved. Those sounds had once anchored me. That morning, they felt like echoes from a life I'd misplaced. I stayed in bed longer than usual, staring at the ceiling, replaying words that weren't meant for me. I feel more alive when we're like this. The sentence looped in my mind, relentless. When I finally went downstairs, Daniel was already dressed for work, tying his shoes by the door. He looked up and smiled, the same small smile I'd seen 1,000 times. "Morning," he said. "You sleep okay?" The question nearly took my breath away. The ease of it, the innocence, or the performance of it. "Not great," I said, truthfully. My voice sounded steady to my own surprise. "Sorry," he said, standing up. He kissed my cheek, quick and automatic. "I've got a long day, might be late." There it was again, that phrase suddenly heavy with meaning. "Okay," I replied, watching him reach for his tablet on the desk, tucking it under his arm like a private extension of himself. The door closed behind him with a soft click. I stood there for a long time after he left, my hand resting on the back of a chair, feeling like the ground had shifted just enough to make everything uncertain. I wanted to scream into the empty house. Instead, I made coffee. The days stretched ahead of me unstructured and oppressive. I tried to go about my usual tasks, laundry, answering emails, watering the plants, but everything felt slowed down, like I was moving through water. My mind kept circling the same questions. How long? Why? What did she give him that I didn't? By noon, I was sitting at the kitchen table with my phone in my hand, staring at Daniel's contact name. I wanted to call him, to demand answers, to hear his voice crack or harden or confess. But another voice inside me whispered caution. You only know what you saw, not why it exists. That was when I realized something else, something colder, more unsettling. I had crossed a line too. I had looked. No matter how justified it felt, I had invaded a space he clearly meant to keep separate. That didn't excuse what he'd done, but it complicated the path forward. Confrontation wouldn't be clean. Nothing about this was. That afternoon, I did something I never thought I would do. I went back to the tablet. This time, my hands were steadier, not because I felt better, but because numbness had begun to settle in, smoothing the sharpest edges of pain. I opened the messages again, scrolling with purpose now, looking for patterns instead of explanations. I noticed how careful he was with her emotions, how he avoided promises, but encouraged hope, how he listened, affirmed, and mirrored her feelings back to her. He was attentive in ways I hadn't realized I'd been missing. And then, buried among the messages, I found something that made my stomach drop. A calendar entry, a date circled, a city name, a hotel. It wasn't definite, more of a possibility, but it was close enough to feel real. Too real. I sat back, my heart pounding, the room suddenly too quiet. This wasn't just an emotional affair drifting in the safe space of screens and words. This was moving towards something physical, tangible. The betrayal took on a new weight then, not louder, just deeper. I thought about calling my sister. She lived across town, always ready with advice and righteous anger. But I wasn't ready for outrage. I wasn't ready for sides to be taken. What I needed first was clarity. That evening, Daniel came home earlier than expected. I was standing at the stove, stirring a pot I'd been heating without intention. He kissed me again, longer this time, as if sensing distance he didn't understand. "You okay?" he asked, studying my face. I met his eyes, really met them. I searched for guilt, fear, something that would confirm what I knew. All I saw was familiarity. "Just tired," I said. The words tasted bitter. We ate dinner together. He talked about work, about a system breach he'd helped prevent, about a colleague who was driving him crazy. I nodded in the right places, laughed once when it seemed expected. Every word felt surreal, layered over another reality only I could see. After dinner, he settled on the couch with his tablet. I watched from the kitchen doorway, my chest tight, as he typed with ease, his thumbs moving quickly, confidently. I wondered if she was on the other end, if she was smiling at the screen, unaware of me standing 10 feet away. That night, lying in bed beside him, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront him yet, not because I was afraid, but because I needed to know who I was dealing with, the man beside me or the man behind the screen. I needed to understand what this second life meant before I decided whether ours could survive it. In the dark, I turned onto my side, facing away from him. His breathing slowed as sleep claimed him. I stayed awake, staring at the wall, feeling the weight of an invisible fracture running through our marriage. Trust, I realized, doesn't shatter all at once. It cracks quietly, and you don't hear it until it's already late. Living with the knowledge felt like carrying a glass bowl filled with cracks. Beautiful from a distance, dangerous if handled wrong. Every day after that decision, I moved carefully. I spoke softly. I observed more than I acted. And in that quiet observation, I learned how skilled Daniel had become at compartmentalizing his life. Mornings returned to routine. Coffee, toast, the newspaper. He asked about my plans. I asked about his meetings. Our conversations were polite, even warm, but something essential was missing. It was like listening to a familiar song played slightly out of tune. You could still hum along, but your body knew something was wrong. At night, he stayed up later, again and again. I began excusing myself to bed earlier, pretending fatigue so I wouldn't have to watch him disappear into that glowing screen. In truth, I needed the distance, needed space to think. And I did think, constantly. I thought about Lena, about the woman who believed she was speaking to a single man with a quiet life and an open future. I wondered what she imagined when she pictured him. Did she know his favorite mug was chipped? That he hummed when he shaved? That he left cabinet doors open without noticing? Did she know he was married? The question haunted me. A few days later, I found the answer. It happened accidentally, or maybe inevitability has a way of disguising itself as chance. Daniel left for work in a hurry that morning, forgetting his tablet on the kitchen counter. It buzzed while I was standing right there, wiping crumbs into my palm. I didn't hesitate this time. The message was short. I keep feeling guilty. Are you sure there isn't anyone else? My chest tightened. I opened the conversation, my heart pounding louder than the refrigerator ever had. Daniel's reply was already there, time-stamped just minutes earlier. No, it's just me, I promise. I sat down hard in the chair, my legs suddenly weak. There it was, clear, unambiguous. He wasn't just hiding me, he was erasing me. I don't remember crying then. I remember a strange calm settling over me, like the air right before a storm breaks. The pain was still there, but it had sharpened into something purposeful. By the time Daniel came home that evening, I had made up my mind. He walked in, loosening his tie, smiling as if the world hadn't quietly ended. "You wouldn't believe the day I had," he said. I turned to face him, leaning lightly against the counter. My hands were steady. My voice was calm. "Daniel," I said, "we need to talk." Something in my tone must have reached him. His smile faltered. He set his briefcase down slowly. "Okay, what's going on?" I gestured to the chair at the table. He sat. I remained standing. "I saw your messages," I said simply. The silence that followed was dense, almost physical. I watched his face change in small increments. Confusion, then calculation, then something like resignation. "What messages?" he asked, though his voice lacked conviction. "The ones with Lena, on your tablet." He swallowed hard. His gaze dropped to the table, then lifted again. "How much did you see?" That question hurt more than denial would have. "Enough," I said. "Enough to know you've been living a second life. Enough to know you told her you were single. Enough to know you promised her something you never promised me." He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling slowly like he was preparing for a difficult task. I didn't mean for it to go this far, he said. I laughed then, not loudly, not cruelly, but with a hollow disbelief that surprised even me. No one ever does, I said. He started talking after that, explaining, justifying, saying words like lonely and trapped, and it didn't mean anything physical. He told me it started as a conversation, a distraction, a way to feel seen again. He said he never planned to leave me. I love you, he said, finally looking at me with something like desperation. This doesn't change that. I listened. I really did. I let him speak until his words ran out, and all that remained was the truth hanging between us. Then I asked the only question that mattered. Do you love her? He didn't answer right away, and that pause told me everything. I care about her, he said carefully. I nodded. My throat burned, but my voice remained even. And does she know about me? Another pause, shorter this time. No, he admitted. I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of it all settle fully in my chest. So you lied to both of us. You built something with her on a foundation of lies, and you kept me in the dark so you wouldn't have to choose. He reached for my hand. I pulled it back gently. I don't know what I want yet, but I do know this. I won't be part of a triangle I didn't agree to. He nodded, tears welling in his eyes now, real ones, I think. Pain doesn't always mean repentance, but it does mean consequence. I'll end it, tonight, I swear. I looked at him for a long moment. You already swore. That night, he slept on the couch. I lay in bed alone, staring at the ceiling, listening to the familiar sounds of the house, sounds that now carried grief instead of comfort. The confrontation hadn't brought relief. It had only opened the door to harder questions. Could trust be rebuilt after being so deliberately dismantled? Could I ever look at him again without seeing the man who typed, "I promise," to someone else? And perhaps the hardest question of all, if I stayed, what part of myself would I lose trying to make sense of what he'd done? The next few days were a study in silence and tension. The house felt different now, smaller and heavier, as if the walls themselves were judging. Daniel moved through it cautiously, careful not to touch the wrong object, careful not to say the wrong word. I moved carefully too, my every glance, every gesture measured, balanced on the edge of confrontation and restraint. He didn't use the tablet again. I assumed he kept his promise, though a part of me wanted to check just once to make sure the other life had ended. I didn't, because part of me understood that in his hiding, he'd made a choice for himself. And choices, even bad ones, are easier to respect if you don't watch them too closely. We tried talking, barely, at the kitchen table over lukewarm coffee. Small sentences that hovered over the air like fragile insects. I asked about work, about errands, about mundane life. He answered, politely, fully, but his words didn't have the same weight they once did. It felt like trying to hold water in my hands. You can cup it for a moment, but it always slips through. And yet, life continued. Emily called on Sunday, as she always did. Matthew sent a text with photos of their new puppy. The mail arrived, bills needed paying, lunches still burned lightly on the stove when I forgot about them. The ordinary continued as if nothing had happened, even though everything had shifted. Then came the first real test. It was a Thursday evening. Rain had started again, soft at first, then insistent, drumming against the roof. Daniel had fallen asleep on the couch earlier than usual, exhausted from a day at work he barely described. I was in the office finishing up some paperwork, my mind trying to focus but circling back to Lena, to him, to the way things had been and the way they would be now. The tablet was there again, on the desk. Black screen, silent, tempting. I didn't touch it at first. My fingers hovered above it, shaking slightly. I imagined all the ways it could ruin the tentative balance we'd built since the confrontation. I imagined seeing something I wasn't meant to see, something I couldn't unsee. And then I realized something. I didn't need to open it. The knowledge of what had happened was already inside me. etched into every memory of him I had. It didn't need verification. It didn't need more proof. It needed acknowledgement, acceptance, choice. I stood there, staring at the screen, and felt a strange sense of power, not because I controlled the secret because I already knew it, but because I could choose what it meant, could choose whether to let it fracture my life completely or let it exist as a scar, a reminder, a lesson. I left the tablet alone. That night, Daniel slept in the bedroom again, a careful distance maintained between us. I lay in bed, listening to the familiar rhythm of his breathing, counting the beats as if each one was a measure of the life we'd built together, life we had to decide whether to save. By the weekend, we had a conversation, long, deliberate, and painful. I asked questions I didn't fully want answers to, about his motivations, about what he felt, about how he envisioned life with her versus life with me. His answers were slow, careful, sometimes contradictory, but he spoke honestly in moments, revealing cracks in his own facade, admissions I hadn't expected. I wanted attention, he admitted. I didn't feel seen anymore. I thought maybe she would make me feel alive again. I didn't interrupt. I didn't argue. I listened. Part of me wanted to forgive. Part of me wanted to scream. Part of me wanted to leave right then and there, to walk away from 22 years of shared memories, from the smell of burnt toast in the mornings, from the hum of the refrigerator, from a life that now seemed like someone else's story. And yet, I stayed. Not because I had to, not because I was weak, because sometimes love is about the hard work of reconstruction even when the original blueprint is flawed beyond repair. We agreed to counseling. I made it clear that trust wasn't something that could be rebuilt in a day or even a year. Daniel agreed, quietly, sincerely, without argument. There were no promises about what the future would hold, only acknowledgments that the past could not be undone and that the choice to continue would not be easy. The process was slow, painfully so. At first, every interaction was loaded with suspicion. Every glance at his phone made my stomach twist. Every absent smile, every whispered comment to a stranger, even the mail that came addressed to both of us, all felt like potential treachery. But over months, small victories accumulated. He deleted the accounts permanently. He let me check, though I rarely did. He allowed openness, radical transparency, without resentment. I began to see him, not the man behind the screen, not the one he'd hidden, but the man I had married, flawed and human, trying to repair a fracture he'd created. And slowly, I began to forgive. Not fully, not quickly. Forgiveness is not a switch. It's a series of tiny steps. A look held without suspicion. A meal shared without questioning motives. A laugh remembered without fear. We didn't return to the ease of the past. That was gone forever. But something else emerged. A cautious, deliberate intimacy. The kind built not on assumption or convenience, but on active choice and ongoing effort. I started noticing him again in ways I hadn't before. The tilt of his head when he's curious, the way he hummed while washing dishes, the warmth in his eyes when he remembered a small kindness I had done weeks ago. These moments became my anchor, reminders that the person you love can hurt you deeply, but still be worthy of a second chance if they choose to act with honesty afterward. One rainy afternoon, much like the day I had first discovered his secret, I found myself standing in the doorway of our office, looking at the empty desk where the tablet had once sat. No messages, no notifications, no secret life. Just the desk, the room, the quiet hum of the air conditioning. I felt a strange peace, not perfect peace, not like the past had been, but a peace that comes from understanding the weight of what was broken and accepting the slow, deliberate work of healing. The fracture was still there, visible if you looked closely, but it no longer threatened to collapse everything around it. I realized then that our lives are full of unseen spaces, hidden choices, and secret selves, and sometimes the most difficult work isn't uncovering those secrets, it's choosing what they mean for you and how you will move forward. I took a deep breath, feeling the rain tapping against the window, and allowed myself to imagine a future that was imperfect, but still mine to shape. A future where trust could grow again, slowly, carefully, and deliberately. Where love wasn't blind or naive, but aware, vigilant, and resilient. It's been almost a year since that night. The night I discovered Daniel's secret digital life. I don't remember a single instant when the weight of that discovery didn't press against my chest. And yet, here I am, sitting in our living room with the rain tapping gently against the window, feeling like I can finally breathe again. Slowly, carefully, deliberately. The truth is, I don't know if our marriage would have survived if I had reacted differently, if I had screamed or packed a bag or called my sister in the first moments after reading those messages. I don't know if the trust we've rebuilt is as strong as the trust we had before. What I do know is this: confronting the truth, no matter how painful, was necessary. And choosing to stay wasn't about ignorance. It wasn't about tolerating betrayal. It was about deciding, with my eyes wide open, what kind of life I wanted to live going forward. I've learned a few things in the months since. I've learned that secrets have power, not because of what they contain, but because of how they make you question yourself. Every memory, every smile, every shared meal can suddenly feel like a lie if you allow doubt to take root. And once doubt takes root, it's hard to know which direction is safe. I've learned that digital lives, hidden, curated, and private, can hide entire worlds. People can be someone entirely different behind a screen. And sometimes that hidden world has nothing to do with the love you share in the real one. It's a reminder that intimacy isn't just about presence, but about honesty. And honesty, in its purest form, can't coexist with secrets. I've learned that forgiveness is not about excusing behavior. It's about choosing to continue, knowing the truth, and setting boundaries for how you will allow the future to unfold. Forgiveness is a daily act, a choice you make over and over again until the pain no longer defines you. Daniel and I don't speak of Lena anymore. The tablet is gone. He has made transparency part of his daily life. No hidden accounts, no whispered messages, no secret selves. We still argue. We still have moments where suspicion surfaces for a heartbeat, but those moments are fleeting now because the foundation of our life is rebuilt on conscious effort instead of assumption. I've also learned something about myself, about resilience, about clarity, about moral courage. I've learned that the hardest choice, whether to confront the hidden truth or ignore it, is not a question of curiosity or control. It's a question of integrity, of knowing what you can live with and what you cannot, of defining for yourself the limits of love, patience, and forgiveness. Some days I still wonder, what if I had chosen ignorance? What if I had closed the tablet and let the mystery exist forever? Would I have felt safer? Perhaps, but I also would have felt smaller, less whole, because true understanding, painful, agonizing understanding, can be the catalyst for the strongest kind of honesty. So I stand by my choice, not because it was easy, and certainly not because it was without heartbreak, but because it taught me something invaluable, that even when the world cracks open, even when the people we love make choices that hurt us deeply, we can decide how to respond, and in that choice, we reclaim ourselves. Now, when I see Daniel, I see him fully. Not the man behind the screen, not the man I thought I knew, but the man who chose transparency, who faced his failings, and who works every day to repair what was broken. And when I see myself, I see someone stronger, someone who survived betrayal without becoming bitter, someone who understands the true cost and the quiet beauty of trust. Life moves forward in small steps, and sometimes the most important victories are the ones that aren't visible to anyone else, the ones that exist quietly in the spaces we inhabit, in the choices we make when no one is watching. I tell this story not for pity, not for judgment, but as a reflection, as a question, a gentle, honest question I ask of you, the person listening now. If you discovered a loved one's secret digital life, would you look? Would you confront the truth, no matter how painful? Or would you choose ignorance, keeping your peace at the cost of certainty? There is no right answer, only the answer that shapes your life, that defines your courage, that decides whether you stay or walk away. And if you found yourself in a place like mine, remember this: you are allowed to feel hurt. You are allowed to feel betrayed. You are allowed to take your time to process, to grieve, and to decide your path forward. But you are also allowed to reclaim yourself, to define your own boundaries, and to choose the kind of life you deserve, no matter how fractured the past may be. So, I leave you with that: a question, a reflection, and a gentle reminder that even in the midst of betrayal, there is always a path to understanding, to healing, and to a future that is entirely your own. Would you have done what I did? Tell me in the comments. And if this story spoke to you, consider subscribing for more reflections like mine, because sometimes the quiet truths are the ones that teach us the most.